Good evening. Thank you for attending tonight. We're happy to see you all. We're fortunate tonight to be able to hear from someone who is very active in an important conversation that's going on and who has had New York Times bestsellers adding to this conversation. Vic Stenger is our speaker tonight. He received a PhD in physics from UCLA in 1963 and then took a position on the faculty of the University of Hawaii and then retiring to Colorado in 2000. His current position is an adjunct professor of philosophy at the University of Colorado and emeritus professor of physics at the University of Hawaii. He has also held visiting positions in the faculties of the University of Heidelberg in Germany, Oxford in England, and has been a visiting researcher at the Rutherford Laboratory in England, the National Nuclear Physics Laboratory in Frascati, Italy, and the University of Florence in Italy. Dr. Stenger's research career spanned the period of great progress in elementary particle physics that ultimately led to the current standard model. He participated in experiments that helped establish the properties of strange particles, quarks, gluons, and neutrinos. He also helped pioneer the emerging fields of very high energy gamma ray and neutrino astronomy. In his last project, before retiring, Dr. Stenger collaborated on the underground experiment in Japan, that's literally underground, not secret, in Japan, that showed for the first time that the neutrino has mass. The project leader received the Nobel Prize in 2002 for that work. Vic Stenger has had a parallel career as an author of 10 critically acclaimed popular level books that interface between physics and cosmology and philosophy, religion, and pseudoscience. His 2000 book, God, the Failed Hypothesis, was a New York Times bestseller. His book, Quantum Gods, came out earlier this year, and his latest book is The New Atheism, Taking a Stand for Science and Reason. So we're very happy to have him tonight. So the way this will work tonight is that Dr. Stenger will give his talk, and then we're going to have a response from the chair of the Religious Studies Department here at Millsaps, Dr. Stephen Smith. Dr. Smith is a theologian and philosopher of religion and has published quite a few books on his own. I don't think that they fit the New York Times bestseller list yet, but one day. And he's very knowledgeable and has a very interesting take on this kind of thing, and is actually teaching a course right now on the intelligent design controversy. So Dr. Stenger will speak, then we'll have Dr. Smith as a respondent, then Dr. Stenger will have a response to that, and then we'll open it up for question and answers. At the end of the question and answer session, Dr. Stenger will be signing books. So if you're interested in purchasing a book, they're outside in the hall and he'll be up there signing. So thank you for coming tonight, and if you'll join me in welcoming Dr. Vic Stenger.
Well, thank you all for coming. Yeah, the book I'll be talking about is the New Atheism. Now, I won't be able to cover everything that's in the book, so what I've tried to do is select out those topics which are more or less unique or new, things that you probably wouldn't have read about anyplace else. So I'll try to keep it to about 50 minutes. So, I'm sorry, 30 minutes, not 50 minutes, 30 minutes. So I have time for, and I'll leave a lot of time for the commentary and questions. Now, the New Atheism began with the publication in, the movement, let's say, that we call the New Atheism began with the publication of a number of books that became bestsellers in the period 2004 to 2007. Began with The End of Faith by Sam Harris, who was a philosophy student, a degree in philosophy, and working on a PhD in neuroscience, a really young guy. But he set the whole thing off. Then he followed that up with a letter to a Christian nation, responding to the thousands of letters that he had gotten over the first book. Then we had the blockbuster of the bunch by the famous zoologist Richard Dawkins, who wrote The God Delusion in 2006. This was on the New York Times bestseller list for 41 straight weeks. Then there was Daniel Dennett's breaking the spell, which was not so much about atheism, but trying to convince everybody that religion should be studied scientifically. Then my book, God, the Failed Hypothesis, came out, and then finally Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great. Probably can't read that, but its subtitle is How Religion Poisons Everything. Now let me just mention a word about my book. In my book, I think, it was a unique book. Many people have agreed with that, and many of the reviewers agree that it does take a unique position. Thousands of books have been written arguing that there's no evidence for God, and most of them have said, yes, but it's possible that God still exists because absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And I dispute that argument. I said there are times when absence of evidence is evidence for absence, when that evidence should be there. I'd like to use the example of someone claiming that there are elephants in Rocky Mountain National Park, not too far from where I live. And obviously there would be evidence for them, pretty clear evidence. It's not likely to be hiding someplace. And so if you have enough people going around the park and they never see any elephants, you can decide beyond a reasonable doubt that elephants don't exist. And so that's the argument I make, that God, the God that most people worship, not every conceivable type of abstract God, but the God that most people worship is a God that should be detectable by science. It's that God, the God of the Jews, Christians, and Muslims, plays a very active role in the universe, created the universe, created life, and listens to every human thought. That God certainly should be detectable and hasn't been. Let me just mention some other people that might be called new atheists. There's Dan Barker, who has a nice new book out called Godless. Dan Barker is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the largest free-thinking group in the country. He was one of these many people who started out as evangelical preachers. He was also a musician. He wrote a lot of Christian music that's still being played in Christian churches. But he tells in this book in particular, and in an earlier book, how he just couldn't, as he thought more and more about it and learned more and more about it, he couldn't be religious. And the same thing was true with the next guy I want to mention, John Loftus, who has also a 2008 book, Why I Became an Atheist. Again, a former preacher who, the more he learned, the more he decided God couldn't exist. Then, just to give you a mixture of people, John Allen Paulos is a well-known mathematician who's written a number of books, and he has this one called Irreligion. And Jerry Coyne is a biologist who has written Why Evolution is True. And finally, I should mention Bill Maher, who's I think would not be unhappy being called a new atheist. I'd like to also mention historian Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman was also a preacher, very devout Christian, went into the study of religion of the New Testament because he wanted to learn more about Jesus and so on. And the more he learned, I mean, he went to all the right schools. He went to Moody Bible College, and ended up at Princeton Theological Seminary, where he started learning, about what the Bible really was, what its history was. He studied it in the original Greek, and eventually became a non-believer. He's written several books. Here in 2001, we have one where he makes the case that Jesus was an apocalyptic preacher. In Misquoting Jesus in 2007, he talks about all of the way the Bible has been rewritten and changed all throughout history, so that what we have now is nothing like it must have been originally. And then his most important book, I think, was God's Problem, which just came out last year. In this book, he talks about